The first night after marriage, I stood in the small kitchen listening to the old refrigerator hum like it was breathing with me. The apartment smelled of boxed food, cheap candles, and a life everyone believed was temporary. My husband sat on the couch counting the few bills in his wallet, shaking his head like the world had already defeated him. My mother-in-law stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes sharp, calculating every corner. She sighed loud enough for me to hear and said, "This place is too small for a new beginning." Her words were heavy, but I kept my face calm. I nodded like a woman who had nothing to offer. They thought we were broke. They thought love had brought us here. They thought survival was all we had. But the walls knew my name. The floor remembered my footsteps from years ago. This apartment had saved me once before. And now it was about to save me again. Years earlier, I had signed papers alone. No celebration, no family, no applause. Just a pen, my name, and a decision to never be powerless again. I never told anyone. Not my husband. Not his mother. Silence was my shield. That night, my mother-in-law complained about the thin curtains. About the neighbors' noise. About how a woman should marry up, not sideways. My husband stayed quiet, embarrassed, tired, caught between love and loyalty. I cooked dinner with hands that never shook. I served them like a guest in my own home. I listened. I learned. I waited. The next morning, she rearranged the living room. Moved furniture without asking. Claimed space like ownership came with age. She said, "We will stay here only until we find something better." I smiled. Because better was already under her feet. Every month she reminded us of money. Of how expensive life was. Of how we depended on luck. She told relatives how her son struggled. How I tried, but times were hard. I let her talk. I let the story grow. Because the truth does not rush. Then one afternoon an envelope arrived. Brown, official, heavy. Addressed carefully. Slipped under the door like fate finally knocking. My mother-in-law picked it up first. She frowned, reading the front. Her mouth tightened. Eviction notice. She whispered the words like a curse. My husband froze. His face drained. He looked at me like we were about to lose everything. I reached for the envelope calmly. My fingers steady. My heart prepared. Because the name printed inside was not the one she expected. And this was only the beginning. My mother-in-law held the eviction notice like it was a death sentence. She reread the paper again and again, hoping the words would change. Her voice rose, asking how much time we had. 30 days, she said, shaking her head, blaming the landlord, blaming bad luck, blaming me without saying my name. My husband paced the room, rubbing his face. He asked, how would we find another place? He said rents were impossible. He said we should call his uncle. He said maybe we should move back with family. I listened quietly. I always listened. My mother-in-law started giving orders. She said we must start packing early. She said we cannot trust landlords. She said a woman should not choose a home without guidance. She looked at me when she said that. That night she called relatives. I heard her voice through the thin walls. She told them we were being thrown out. She told them her son married into struggle. She told them she warned him. The next day neighbors began asking questions. Sympathy mixed with judgment. People always speak softly when they think you are losing. My husband stopped sleeping well. He worried about money. About pride. About failure. He apologized to me for the life he thought he had given me. I held his hand. I told him we would be fine. I told him sometimes storms come before safety. He did not understand. Not yet. My mother-in-law demanded to see the notice again. She said she wanted to speak to the landlord herself. She said she knew how to handle such men. She dialed the number on speaker. The call did not go as planned. The voice on the other end asked for the property owner. She said she was the family elder. She said the owner was irresponsible. She said this eviction was unfair. There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause. The man asked her name. Then he asked if she was listed anywhere on the deed. Her confidence cracked. She said no, but she lived there. Another pause. He said the eviction notice was a legal formality. He said there would be no move out. He said the owner already approved the renewal. My mother-in-law looked confused. Angry. Embarrassed. She demanded to know the owner's name. The man spoke it clearly. Slowly. Like reading history. My name. The room went silent. No one breathed. No one spoke. My husband stared at me like I had become a stranger. My mother-in-law laughed once, sharp and forced. She said that is not possible. She said I was just a wife. She said I was nothing before marriage. I met her eyes calmly and said some women build quietly. That night the power shifted. But the battle had just begun. The silence after my name was spoken felt heavier than any argument. My husband sat down slowly like his legs could no longer hold the truth. His eyes searched my face not for anger, but for answers he never asked before. My mother-in-law stood frozen, then suddenly laughed again, louder this time. She said this must be a mistake. She said papers can be wrong. She said girls do not buy apartments alone. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. I simply walked to the drawer. I took out the folder I had kept hidden under old bills and memories. I placed it on the table. The sound of paper touching wood felt final. She flipped through the pages aggressively. Her fingers trembled. Her breath grew uneven. Each page confirmed what she feared. My husband read silently. His hands shook, not from betrayal, but from realization. He whispered, "Why did you not tell me?" I said, "Because sometimes love needs safety first." Because I had learned long ago that silence can protect what honesty destroys. My mother-in-law snapped. She accused me of deception, of trapping her son, of planning control from the beginning. She cried loudly. She said she left her home to support us. She said I embarrassed her. She said a good daughter-in-law shares everything. I listened. I always listened. Then she changed tactics. Her voice softened. She said we are family now. She said names on paper do not matter. She said elders should decide. She suggested adding her son's name. She suggested restructuring ownership. She suggested trust. Trust. The word sounded hollow. That evening she cooked dinner for the first time. She smiled too much. She asked about my childhood. She asked about my dreams. I answered politely, carefully. Later that night she cried in the bedroom loud enough for neighbors to hear. She told my husband she felt useless. She told him she felt replaced. She told him I was separating him from his mother. My husband sat between two worlds. The one that raised him, and the one that sheltered him. He did not choose. Not yet. But I knew something had changed. The house felt different. Like it was finally listening. And my mother-in-law had realized. She was no longer in control. The next weekend relatives arrived without invitation. Suitcases, questions, opinions, all together. My mother-in-law had called them with a cracked voice. She told them her son was being controlled. She told them a young wife had hidden things. They filled the living room, sat on my couch, drank my coffee, judged my silence. An aunt asked how a girl like me afforded such a place. An uncle joked about luck. Another relative whispered about manipulation. I stood in the kitchen listening, cutting vegetables slowly, each sound grounding me. My mother-in-law spoke like a victim. She said she felt homeless in her own son's life. She said ownership should belong to the family. She said tradition mattered. I walked into the room calmly. I greeted everyone politely. I said welcome. They looked surprised. They expected tears. They expected defense. Instead, I handed them copies. Not explanations. Just documents. The room shifted. Papers speak louder than voices. My mother-in-law accused me of humiliation. She said I should have discussed privately. She said respect was missing. I said respect grows where honesty lives. And honesty sometimes waits for safety. That night my husband argued with her for the first time. His voice was low but firm. He said she crossed lines. He said this was our marriage. She cried again. She packed a bag. She said she would leave. No one stopped her. She did not leave. Instead, she called a lawyer friend. She began asking questions. She began planning. I felt it. The air thickened. Control does not surrender easily. My husband asked me if I was planning to leave him. I said no. I said I planned to stay, but only where I was respected. He nodded. Torn. Learning. The apartment stood quietly, watching everything, holding secrets. Because the final battle would not be loud. It would be legal. The lawyer letter arrived 2 weeks later, sealed, heavy, intentional. My mother-in-law held it like a weapon. She said it was only advice. She said it was protection for her son. My husband read it slowly. His jaw tightened. The letter suggested shared ownership, suggested marital contribution, suggested emotional dependence disguised as law. My mother-in-law said a wife should not stand above her husband. She said power ruins love. She said men feel small. My husband looked at me then. For the first time, he did not look afraid. He looked aware. He asked her why she needed control. He asked why love required paperwork. She said she only wanted security. I asked calmly, whose security? The room went quiet. That night she told neighbors. She told church friends. She told anyone who would listen. She painted herself as abandoned, as displaced, as betrayed. Whispers followed me in elevators. Looks lingered. Judgment traveled fast. I kept walking. I kept working. I kept sleeping peacefully. My lawyer spoke clearly. He said the law was simple. He said ownership was singular. He said marriage does not erase history. My husband attended every meeting. He asked questions. He learned. One evening, he came home late. He sat beside me. He said he never knew how much pressure controlled his life. He said he never knew silence could be strength. My mother-in-law overheard. She cried. She said I stole her son. I did not respond. Because love that must be stolen was never owned. The breakdown came quietly, not with shouting, not with threats, but with exhaustion. My mother-in-law stopped pretending. She sat at the dining table staring at nothing. Her strength finally drained. She said she gave her whole life to her son. She said she sacrificed dreams. She said she deserved control in return. My husband listened without interrupting. For the first time, he did not rush to comfort. He let the truth sit between them. She asked him to choose. Not directly, but with tears, with memories, with guilt. She said if he stood with me, she would leave. She said she could not live under my roof. The words landed heavy, but clear. My husband stood up slowly. He said he loved her. He said he respected her. But he said marriage was partnership, not surrender. She looked at me then, not with anger, but with defeat. She asked why I hid the truth. I said because women who reveal power too early are taught to lose it. I said survival teaches patience. That night, she packed her bags fully this time. No drama. No audience. She stood at the door waiting for my husband to stop her. He did not. The door closed softly, like a chapter ending. The apartment felt lighter. Breathing again. My husband sat beside me. He said he was afraid of my strength before. He said now he was grateful. I leaned my head on his shoulder. Not because I needed protection, but because partnership finally existed. One final letter remained. The eviction notice file closed. Stamped resolved. But one more truth still waited. Months passed quietly, without tension, without fear, without performance. The apartment transformed from a battlefield into a home. Sunlight returned. Laughter softened the walls. My husband learned how to live without permission. He cooked. He cleaned. He planned futures with me, not around me. One afternoon, another envelope arrived. Not brown. Not threatening. Just official calm. It was the updated deed. Still only one name. Mine. My husband read it and smiled. He said power does not scare him anymore. He said respect makes love stronger. We framed nothing. We announced nothing. Silence had already done its work. One evening, my mother-in-law called. Her voice was quieter. Older. She said she understood now. She said control was her shield too. I listened. I always listened. I told her she was welcome to visit. Not to rule, but to rest. She agreed. That night I stood by the window, looking at the city lights, thinking of the girl who once signed papers alone. Afraid but determined. Marriage did not save me. Preparation did. The eviction notice never meant removal. It meant revelation. And the home I protected in silence protected me back.